Happy holidays from the Behind the Bells podcast.
Marker. And action.
This is Behind the Bells, the show that takes you behind the magic of your favorite Christmas movies and shows. Within the background of every Santa Claus, reindeer, and stocking is a story. Where did it come from? Our Christmas movie expert will unravel all of that and give you the full story. Sit back and enjoy another episode with Robert Nicholas.
Merry Monday, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Bells. I'm your host, Robert Nicholas, and I'll be taking you on another one-horse open sleigh ride into the world of Christmas movies. Today's film explores a clause in a contract that forces a man to take up the mantle of St. Nicholas. Along with the fantasy transformation he goes through, he also manages to reconnect with his son and restore the boy's belief in Santa Claus. This is a movie about the magic of Christmas, making a man better and giving a world a glimpse of the Santa they haven't seen since they were children. This is Disney's The Santa Claus, so keep your hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times. Let's go for a ride. We've gotten stories like the Elf Frank Baum novel The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, and the stop-motion animated Rankin Bass special, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, that have all explained the origins of Santa Claus, or at least the version that's become the icon of the holiday with the sleigh, the reindeer, and the gift-giving. But this is definitely one of the first modern stories about an ordinary guy who becomes the real deal. So what would a guy think if he was told he had to become the next Santa and saying no is not an option? What if a child, especially one that didn't even believe in Santa, now had to live with the idea that his dad was now the greatest known holiday icon? And of course, can Tim Allen, a stand-up comedian known for his snarky mouth, become that holiday icon? These questions are explored in The Santa Claus, or as much as they can while still being a crowd-pleasing Disney movie. To be fair, it certainly made me happy as a kid. I was around 7 when the film came out in 1994. I don't recall seeing any trailers or posters for the movie. I don't even think I had seen that much of Tim Allen's sitcom, Home Improvement either. At best, I might have seen an ad for it on the Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, but I remember going into the movie blind. If anything, I recall seeing more trailers and posters for a competing movie, The Page Master starring Macaulay Culkin. As a kid, I found myself really captivated by The Santa Claus. Not only did I see The Santa Claus as a nice Christmas movie, to give me that Yuletide spirit that I normally got in December but now had year-round, but I also found Tim Allen to be likable even when he was a jerk. He always came off as the kind of dad who would be playful with their own kid and would try to make him laugh. I could see that even at that age, that he really wanted to be with his son while not exactly sure on how to balance a successful toy marketing career and being a loving father. He tried to give his son a nice Christmas Eve, even though as shown through a scene where he's trying to skip through a reading of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, isn't as enthusiastic as his son is. I saw the movie as kind of a 5-step program for Christmas enthusiasm: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. He was in denial that what he saw was real. He was angry that his son wouldn't stop talking about it, bargaining that he could still have a quote-unquote Santa Claus look and still go on with his life, depressed that he didn't know what was real anymore, and finally accepting his role as Santa Claus. And if it took becoming Santa Claus to being a better person, then it was what it was. As an adult, I still see the movie as quite likable, if not for nostalgic reasons. The story of the Santa Claus is similar to the Twilight Zone episode Night of the Meek starring Art Carney. That story was also about a man who started off normal but eventually became Santa Claus, though the key difference was that that man had found a sack that allowed him to give people the things they needed, earning him his transformation. Tim Allen, too, does earn his transformation, though through different circumstances. While Disney could have taken their own story into something similar to The Twilight Zone, the final result isn't bad, it's safe. The movie doesn't have complex characters, doesn't explore a lot of new territory on Santa Claus, and doesn't even contemplate complex themes around Christmas and what it means for a lot of people. To its credit, that was never really the goal of the Santa Claus. It clearly wanted to be a warm Christmas movie for families to watch once a year, and it seems to have that legacy. What I wanted to know was where it all came from. How did the story come about? How did Disney acquire this? How did Tim Allen come on board despite not having made a movie before? So let's ring out the bells and take a look at the history behind the Santa Claus. The magic began in 1989, not with Tim Allen and not with Disney, but with two other comedians, Steve Rudinick and Leo Bevenuti. The two had met in 1978 in Chicago at the Players' Workshop of Second City, both having backgrounds in performing. Steve was born and raised in Illinois, while Leo was born in Italy before he and his family immigrated to the United States when he was 5, settling in Chicago. Both were close to the Windy City, and both had shown themselves to be talented before they met. When they did meet, Steve saw that the two made a great team and asked if Leo wanted to join as a duo. The latter said, "Sure, neat," seeing comedy as a way to get away from living with his father. Steve and Leo toured around the country, making their living as comics, performing from one comedy club to the next. It was around 1989 when the duo were feeling burnout from consistently being on the road and not having moved up to the next stream of television. It was sometime then that Steve had come up with an idea for a story about a man who killed Santa Claus and took his identity. Both agreed that they hadn't seen something like that before and that it might have potential as a movie. So despite not having any experience in writing a screenplay, they crafted a first draft, which was first titled Such a Clatter. The story still kept the premise about a man who kills Santa Claus and had to take his identity, but it wasn't quite the family film that we know now. According to Tim Allen, quote unquote, the original script was much darker, did not have a child side character, and even opened the story with Santa getting killed by a shotgun. I have to admire the writers for being gutsy enough for trying something somber and out of left field for a story about Jolly St. Nick. Perhaps if the same script had shopped around today, it might have been picked up by Warner Brothers or Netflix as a weirder Christmas movie like 2015's Krampus. But as it was for the early 1990s, the two started to shop it around to various parties, hoping that at least one person would see the same potential that they saw. They eventually came across a smaller production company called Outlaw Productions. They were new, but already had some well-known movies under their belts such as Sex, Lies, and Videotape and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. They would later help produce other family films like that Gorilla Road movie Born to be Wild and the direct-to-video sequel Dennis the Menace Strikes Again. When Such a Clatter came to them, they optioned the script for $10,000 but wanted to find another large company to help finance for what they felt could be a holiday hit. The script had made its way to Rick Makina and Richard Baker, who were then managers for Tim Allen. The script had also been seen by Jimmy Miller, who was the scriptwriting manager for Tim's sitcom Home Improvement. All three felt that the story was a good fit for Tim, who had made his fame through his stand-up in television, but had not yet gotten the chance to do a movie. It would take a while for Tim to read the script due to his TV schedule, but once he found time to read it, he also thought it would be perfect for him. Outlaw Productions was happy to have gotten another foot into the door, but had other ideas to who could also play the role of Scott Calvin. They had even sent the script to Bill Murray, as both scriptwriters Steve and Leo wrote the role with him in mind. According to them, Bill had said no because he felt his style of humor was wrong for the part, and he had already just completed a much troubled production on another Christmas movie, Scrooge. They had also considered actors like Tom Hanks, Robin Williams, Harrison Ford, Rowan Atkinson, Jerry Seinfeld, John Ritter, and many others. Still, Tim Allen's agents were able to persuade Outlaw Productions that his brand of humor would make for quite a unique Santa. Plus, Tim would then use his connection with one of Home Improvement's producers, Jeffrey Katzenberg. Most people associate Katzenberg with DreamWorks Animation and the now recently defunct streaming service Quibi. But at the time, he was the head of production for Walt Disney Studios. Katzenberg was spellbound by the script, and had also agreed that this could not only be a potential holiday classic, but had the confidence that Tim was the right man for the job. He also had the power to help grant Tim an exception in order to star in the movie. As for EC, Disney has a strict rule for not hiring ex-cons, and Tim was already arrested once in 1987 at the Kalamazoo airport, having smuggled 650 grams of cocaine. He took the plea deal and served 2 years in prison. Katzenberg got a deal set up in which the movie would be made under the Hollywood Pictures banner. Like Touchstone, Hollywood Pictures was first created to help churn out more adult and mature movies. Their first movie in 1989, Arachnophobia, had already proved that they could make a darker, even scary picture and still cater to a family audience. What Katzenberg wanted was a family film and not a scary one. He wanted many of the darker parts from Such a Clatter changed. He felt that it was not okay to start a Christmas film with murder. So the first round of rewrites commended with the assistance of Katzenberg's favorite screenwriter, Janet Brownwell, whose prior credits included the soap opera Days of Our Lives and other TV movies, including a remake of Christmas in Connecticut, directed by, believe it or not, Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I'll get to in some other episode. She first changed from Santa being killed by a gunshot to falling off a roof. She had also added more emotion to cement it in as a family holiday comedy. She and Leo and Steve continued to make more amendments to the script, including the larger addition of the child character, Charlie. Finally, the film's title was changed from Such a Clatter to The Santa Claus. And of course, that's Claus in C-L-A-U-S-E. We'll get to the rest of the pre-production history in just a moment.
And now back to the show with our Christmas movie expert, Robert Nicholas.
While script work was being completed, director John Pasquin was hired to direct The Santa Claus. Though bigger name directors like Steve Rash and Ron Howard were brought up, John had already worked with Tim Allen, having directed several episodes of Home Improvement, and would eventually work with him again on Jungle to Jungle, Joe Somebody, and The Last Man Standing. Pasquin had a lot of television experience, but no feature film experience. And at the time, he originally planned to turn down the directing job as quoted, "I had been working on Home Improvement dealing with kids for a year and a half. I had thought that I'd like to do some more grown-up piece of material." Quote unquote. It's clear that by that time, The Santa Claus was far from the dark script that Tim Allen had originally read. Pasquin decided to get a second opinion from his wife, actress Jo Beth Williams, and had her read the script. She told her husband that he needed to take this project, as she felt the movie not only had the potential to be a holiday classic, she knew it was going to be a classic. He signed on as director with the notion that he had already known how to make the best use of Tim Allen's comedic style. The project was originally slated to begin production around 1993, though Tim Allen's year was busy with another season of Home Improvement and a variety of stand-up projects. Katzenberg agreed to delay the start of the movie until 1994 with the goal of releasing it that same November. The time was used to cast the other parts. For the role of Charlie, they needed a child that would be the driving force of the emotional context, being the first to see his dad as Santa Claus and being that story's motivator to help Scott Calvin go from becoming that brick to finding that new purpose. They also wanted to find a child between the ages of 6 and 9, not wanting someone who would be too old to be questioning their belief. Disney had open auditions in more than 10 cities with the intention of casting an unknown. Once they narrowed down their choices, they were then test screened with Tim Allen to find one that had the exact right chemistry and could complement his comedy. Eric Lloyd was chosen because he was able to convey a sweetness in that relationship and act as a role that any child can see themselves in. Now for the role of Laura, director Pasquin wanted an actress who would be able to enhance Tim Allen's role, being the non-believer, expressing concern that her down-to-earth influence is lost in her son, getting caught up in a game that might be going too far. The casting proved to be much more competitive than Disney expected, especially considering that the role wasn't even that big. actresses considered, including Home Improvement star Patricia Clarkson, though that was ruled out in fear of being seen as an accidental Home Improvement movie. They also considered Patricia Heston, Kate Burton, Nicole Kidman, Molly Ringwald, and Pamela Reed. Canadian actress Wendy Crewson, having previously played a mother in The Good Son, and having plenty of experience in TV, was casted. For the role of Neil, the producers knew that since his character was a psychiatrist and Laura's new husband, they needed an actor that could be Tim Allen's opposite, practical, mental, and just someone that had his full life together. Actors like Jeff Daniels, Stanley Tucci, and Bradley Winford were considered, though they felt Judge Reinhold had something of a mellow sense of humor that was seen as the right opposite of Tim Allen and something of a parallel version of a father that Charlie had always wanted. He already had a few hit movies like Beverly Hills Cop and Gremlins on his resume, and was casted immediately. Though a smaller role, appearing in only 2 scenes in the final movie, Peter Boyle, the monster from Young Frankenstein, and Frank Barone from Everybody Loves Raymond, was casted as Scott Calvin's boss, who was also one of the first people in the movie to see that physical transformation. He would also get to play Father Time in the later sequels. Now, even though we'll get to the Elves later on, it was around before the start of production that it was decided that the Elves wouldn't be played by little people or adults, as traditionally done in most other Christmas specials about Santa. The script itself didn't call for a specific age, but director Pasquin decided to cast child actors, with the idea being that despite being hundreds of years old, they retain an immortal youthful look. The goal was to make the North Pole a much more jolly place rather than a toy factory. And it was also a way to make it so that Charlie had another set of kids to talk to, rather than adults. And the more I thought about it upon rewatching it, the more I realized that the same dialogue spoken by adults and little people probably wouldn't have come off as fantasy-like, and perhaps a little creepy if they were the only ones Charlie had to speak to. I'm honestly glad that they decided to go with children in this case. I personally want to thank everyone for joining us for our very first episode of Behind the Bells. Come back next week to hear more about the Santa Claus and everything that happened around its shooting, post-production, the notes that Michael Eisner gave that changed things, and its overall box office performance. I can't wait to take you on another ride, and I will see you then.
Thank you for joining us on this sleigh ride into the magical world of Christmas movies. Check us out for weekly rides into your favorite Christmas classics and their histories. Be sure to give us a positive review on iTunes if you like what you heard. And don't forget to follow us on social media on Facebook and Instagram for updates and special news. Consider subscribing on Patreon in order to help keep the show going and to gain access to some special gifts not available to the public. Merry Monday to all, and to all a good night. See you next week.
Cut. Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.